We just forgot to thank before we start our question and answer. We want to thank Ben Weiss from Paradigm and Nick LaPiccolo. I think they're here, and Annie Roney with Rocco Film. She's our international sales agent, and we had a couple more people. Post Factory, who totally helped us get the film finished. Alex Halpern and everyone from there. Mish, colorist. Okay. So we'd like to invite a couple people up from our film who are here in the audience. We have Charles Davidson, our executive producer, Jack Blum, Jim Henry, Chuck Collins, Cindy Lee, our editor, Brian Litt, our DP. We have Dan Radlauer, our composer, and we have a bunch of US Uncut activists with us. Ryan Clayton, Kira, Joanne, Michelle. Sorry, I'm forgetting things. Adam. Adrian Belich is here too. He helped film for the film. Woo! So I guess we can just start it off with any questions from the audience. Oh, there's one in the back, right there.
Hi there. So first of all, I love your film. I love it.
Thank you.
Okay. I want to say, first of all, I am a corporation. I employ 10 people, and my corporate tax rate is 35%. And so it's hard to watch people pay 0% at that. So I just love it. It makes me feel like I want to be an activist with you guys. So thank you.
Come on down.
So my one question I had, though, because I'm all about getting a full big movement, is that I noticed the Tea Party was put in there, and I'm not Republican, Democrat, I don't care. I want people to pay their taxes. And it seemed like there was a presentation that they were for corporate taxation instead of just for hey, I'll pay more taxes the minute they pay their taxes. And I wonder if there's a common ground or if you see a dichotomy between those groups.
Answer.
Would like to take that, Jack? I'll throw that one to Jack Blum.
It's a tough one.
Microphone.
So much of what the Tea Party has done. So much of what the Tea Party has done has been financed and motivated by the people who are lobbying to cut taxes. And I don't think there's going to be much common ground. And I know some of the uncut people have met with and tried to talk to Tea Party leadership. They've told them, go jump.
Interesting. For corporate taxes, they're pro-corporate taxes, not being cut.
Can I comment on that?
This is Ryan Clayton, everyone.
So I've had this conversation. We went to a Tea Party rally, one of the ones that was shown, and we held a big banner that said, the other 95% of us, President Obama, thank you for our tax cut. And we handed out flyers with all of the tax cuts that they got to all the Tea Party people. And we were like, congratulations on your tax cut. And they're like, what tax cut? And we're like, all of these. And they're like, we didn't get a tax cut. We're like, oh, you make over $250,000 a year? And they're like, no. We're like, well, then you got these tax cuts. So I've had that conversation, and there's just literally a disconnect, I believe, with the way that the Tea Party perceives the world and the way that the world actually is. And that's unfortunate for them, because they don't win at the end of the day. At the end of the day, I know that our country, as with many great other social struggles in our country, which for a very long time hasn't been the economic struggle in our country, is now coming home to roost. And in 50 years, maybe even in 10, we're gonna see dramatic changes, and the country that is the future in 10 years and 50 years doesn't look like Tea Party America. It looks like a country that's more equitable, that's more just, where someone like you who contributes to the economy and contributes to your taxes actually benefits for the services you provide, because you are a part of our community. We want more people like you.
Yes, sir, in the front.
A comment first. Thank you. First time I've seen a credit for fact checker. And I think that that's really, really important with all the misinformation that comes out of media. But my question is, we're going into an election year. This film is very critical of our president. And now we're all going to be twisted and turned around, that we're going to have to forget all the things that we see in this film that the administration either gave into or didn't stand up for. And the problem, and I'm asking from the academics to the uncut people, how the hell do we not give in under the spin of an election year and let the Republicans or the Tea Party values win in this country? This is about Obama, so please.
Should I do it? Okay. Jim Henry, people?
I think one of the points of this film, one of the strong points that we've tried to make, is that this is a long-term problem. It's taken us decades to get into. It's not something that's owned by any party. All parties have been subject to the campaign contributions, the political influence in Washington. All parties, Clinton was a very big player in this, helped to open the doors to products made in countries that don't follow our environmental and labor laws, and have been in favor of the wonders of tax cutting. So, this isn't just about this election year, and I think we make a big mistake if we try to focus in on who's responsible or who is just the best candidate from this short-term perspective. This is a long-term movement. The problems that we're solving and addressing are problems that will require a decade of work and organization. And the real mission of this film, I think, is to educate people about the need to get involved beyond parties and beyond elections in a continuing struggle that's going to take a long time for us to get our country back.
There are things that happen immediately that we are dealing with. So Mitt Romney wouldn't release his tax returns, is doing business in the Cayman Islands through his various funds, and that became an issue in the campaign, and I would wager that was a good 50% of why he lost that primary election in South Carolina. So it's having an immediate impact, and I'm just hoping that that debate goes further. The next time around in Florida, they talk about it again, and pretty soon there are going to be a lot of people who are aware that if you're very rich and running a hedge fund, you can pay 15% tax, pay no Social Security tax, live in your mansion and tell everybody else they ought to cut their benefits.
Could this lady speak too? She wanted to
Sure.
speak.
Awesome.
You're from the UK.
I am. Okay, I'm not much of a public speaker, but I am a student, and so I am the future, I guess. The iconic face, the nameless face. Well, my name was up there, but I think the parties, if someone is so devoted to a party, they get blinded to the fact that they're trying to solve problems by being a part of that party. They're not just trying to stick to being a Democrat or being a Republican, or I'm a Tea Party, or I'm very conservative, or, liberalism. But they need to focus more on fixing what they think is wrong. And a lot of people, they like to say, oh, Obama's done this wrong and Obama's done that wrong. And I agree, he's not as bold as we all had hoped him to be. He gave in to things that, not everyone agrees with. But he's also done a lot more than probably anyone just sitting in a cafe could have done, anyone just sitting and doing nothing or working or whatever. And people just tend to put their problems on other people, and they don't accept the blame, and that's the biggest problem. And my future is being affected by people who don't pay attention to the finer details. And that's the hardest part, because I have to watch it. And although, I'm young, sometimes people take that and they're like, she's young, she's going for it, she wants to say something. But then, the Occupy people, you realize that the women that were activists to earn their right to vote, they stood in the sleet and the snow and rain and pouring conditions for years to earn their right to vote. And that's what the Wall Street's hopefully trying to do. People are asking us what we want. What we want is equal pay. And we don't want to see Depression-era imagery. We're already seeing some of it some places where there are homeless everywhere. And so
I support Occupy and I support US Uncut, and I hope people support me being the young person and the young face. I may not be an expert, but I'm a student, and I'm not as eloquent a speaker as most people, but I'd like to learn to be. So I don't want them to ruin that for me.
In the back? There, no, you, oh. With the hat first, and then you're in the back. Oh gosh, Sundance. Black hat.
Thank you so much. I absolutely love your film. I live in Washington, D.C. I actually work on the Hill, and as a Democratic Hill staffer in a Republican Congress, I will tell you that it's just as horrific and frustrating from the inside. But my question is, I mean, you entered your film with a lot of focus on the Occupy movement, and I'm curious, where do you think that's going? Are you optimistic about its success? Are you optimistic about any of this at all? And what can we be doing to help you in Washington, D.C.?
I'll take a stab at that one. I'm super optimistic. The minute that I met the people from US Uncut, I felt a sea change within my being. As a mom, as a person, as an American, I felt like this is something that's going to spark a real revolution in this country. I feel like as a 45-year-old person, my generation has been asleep, and all of this stuff was happening right under our noses, and we were just blind to it. So I realized that these young people were the first people to get out on the streets. You know, they had realized what we had failed to realize, that, you know, the corporations were taking over our government little by little until, you know, it is what you see on film today. And when, you know, at the end of the film, I still, you know, I said, I can't wait to see my friends up here again because you guys have inspired me. Thank you. And thank you for all of you people, because you did the work that was able to feed to us. And these people didn't crunch the numbers, they didn't come up with the ideas. It was all done by people like you. So thank you to our experts, thank you to our activists. I love you guys.
I was going to say, I think the woman who introduced herself as a business owner, I think one of the things the film does great, one of many things, is the section where it's very clear there are, you know, a couple thousand corporations that are rigging the rules of the game and avoiding taxes, but there's hundreds and thousands of small businesses, really the 99.5% of businesses in this country, that are, you know, built to last, rooted and anchored in their communities and creating real jobs. And I think one of the things this film does is it juxtaposes and says, look, this is an unlevel playing field. And I think that's where there's some tremendous new allies that can be won over. Not in necessarily the Tea Party movement's going to be won over, but there's a lot of small business people who I think are potential allies for this work. So I think that's one of the things the film does really well. And the other thing I'll just say is there's a lot of documentaries you see that are kind of like the bad news documentary. You come out of it just feeling like, wow, I didn't know it was that bad. And I think what Karin and Vicky have done so well is to show that this is not, we don't have to be paralyzed here, that in the film are the seeds of agency, of people saying, we're just learning about this, but we're already mad, we're going to do something about it. And I think it's kind of a new wave of documentary. So I think that for this conversation at Sundance about documentary, I just want to salute them for showing this isn't just another documentary about how bad something is. It's showing us how people are making change and pointing the way to how it's going to happen.
And please correct me if I'm wrong, but I heard a
this is our first festival, and we don't know where we're going next in terms of festivals. So that is a rumor. And in terms of corporate response, we did. One of the first people that we reached out to early on was Google's tax director, and they declined to be interviewed. And then a lot of the other CEOs we were able to find, they had made many statements, and as you saw in the news, about what their situation was of money overseas or what they desired. So we decided to stick with that and let what they had said already speak to that portion of it. So.
Add something.
Oh, Charles.
Can I add something after Charles?
No, I mean, you're asking us what the risk we took in doing this. I mean, we're set up as a small corporation, so the worst case scenario is, GE can sue onshore productions and, take the great profits we're going to make. That's it. Worst case scenario.
And I would personally like to thank GE for supporting Sundance. And I would like to say, since GE cares so much about the arts, maybe they'd like to pay their taxes, because just with their 3 years of tax payments, they could probably fund the National Endowment for the Arts for about 1,000 years. Thank you, GE.
And as one of the several attorneys on this team, I would say to General Electric and any other potential litigants that it would be the best possible thing for you to sue us, because we would love to have that day in court and cross-examine you about all these business practices. But on a lighter note, I think the issue about Occupy Wall Street and where they go from here, there's 1,000 ways they could go. But one of the themes we emphasized here, and I think it cut across a lot of the films that were discussed today on this panel, was the importance of the political muscle of corporate interests in Washington. And we need basically to organize around whether it's healthcare, nuclear power, the tax issues we raised here, the health and safety, and all the spending cuts that are going on. All of those issues are fundamentally affected by the lobbying power in Washington. So that's a theme that I think Occupy would well focus on going forward.
I'd just like to add one thing. There have been quite a number of groups working in Washington to correct the problem. We haven't gotten in those groups the kind of traction that comes from a mass support like Occupy Wall Street. But what's happened is the groups have now come together. So there's a coalition called the FACT Coalition. It's come together under the impetus of the Tax Justice Network. Check the websites for those organizations. There are plenty of things people can do to get involved. And what's happened is, because of the combination of US Uncut, because of the Occupy movement, these organizations are now energized and trying to move forward. And there's a lot that can be done. And finally, the people who've been working the inside game are connecting to the people who are working the outside game.
Mic check. Mic check. Chris, would you lead the audience in a mic check?
Mic check. Mic check.
Mic check.
We the people.
We the people
of the United States.
Of the United States.
Declare these truths to be self-evident.
Declare these truths to be
Self-evident.
That all men are created equal.
That all men are created equal.
And endowed with certain inalienable rights.
And endowed with certain inalienable rights.
Life.
Life.
Liberty.
Liberty.
And the pursuit of happiness.
And the pursuit of happiness.
Corporations do not have these rights.
Corporations do not have these rights.
Because they are not people.
Because they are not people.
Corporations are property.
Corporations are property.
Money is property.
Money is property.
It is not speech.
It is not speech.
We the people.
We the people
Must reclaim.
Our
democracy.
Our democracy.
For ourselves.
For ourselves.
For our children.
For our children.
For our grandchildren.
For our grandchildren.
For this world.
For this world.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to thank everyone for staying. Thank you to the filmmakers and everyone involved. And please don't forget to cast your ballots. Good evening.